What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Player One vs. World, my YouTube channel here. And you've got a very familiar face here. 4 years ago, she was on here. We were talking about Life is Strange comics. Life is Strange royalty, big part of the franchise. Not part of it now, but obviously a big part, and then we'll come on to what she did as well. Comic book writer, artist, very talented writer on the Life is Strange comic series, Emma Vieceli. Emma, hello, how are you?
Hello. How'd you follow that introduction? Hi.
I've set you up for greatness there. And I think a lot of people really obviously admire what you did on the franchise. You're no longer part of it, but again, we'll come on to that later. But obviously very happy to have you on here, and it's a long time coming. One of my favorite interviews I did with you 4 years ago on the channel where we talked about Life is Strange for ages. You had a lot more of a sore throat at that time as well.
Oh,
but you don't now. Yeah, I was chasing you up for a while, and you kept saying I have like a sore throat. You eventually got on there.
I lost, I don't know how much, if people follow me online, they might have known. It might have been just before it happened. I lost my voice for 9 months in the first year of the pandemic. It all got diagnosed and sorted now, but yeah, one of the outcomes of what was going on with my body is that I literally couldn't speak. I couldn't make a sound for 9 months. So while everyone else was in lockdown going, oh, thank goodness for video calls, I was like, going slowly mad in my own head.
I feel even worse for now getting you on here when you had I kept sending you messages like, Emma, can you come on? You're like, I've got a sore throat. Eventually got you on here. You had your brew, and it was like amazing to catch up with you, but you're like powering through it, and I really admired your fortitude to get through that interview. And it was really good.
I can laugh about it now, and it was a really lovely chat. I remember it was a lovely chat, but yeah, I laugh about it now. But 9 months, I went absolutely insane.
No, it's one of those rough experiences, but we're through that now. We're now in 2024, which is crazy. And Emma, before we start as well, I just always do this for the YouTube people as well. If you are new here and you like all the content we produce, do consider dropping subscribe on the channel, turn notifications, like the video, and share your friends. Help support Life is Strange channel, bring a lot of interviews, a lot of content, so do stay tuned for that. Speaking of which, Emma, I'm going to take you back first, which was only this month or last month, which is where we met at Travelling Man in Manchester. Yeah. Jace took me along there. We bumped into each other. I spotted you from a mile away. I was like, that's Emma Vieceli. I was hovering over one of the tables. I was like waiting because I was like, I sent Jace to the counter as well. I was like, Jace, can you find out if we can go and speak to Emma and Rachel? I was like, sitting there. And then I obviously came over with my comics to ambush you. But one thing I wanted to ask you, because my brother saw this as well and I noticed it as well. So in the comics, which I have here, which is my lovely comics, I have mine signed by Emma Vieceli, none other than her. However, I also have in the corner here 2 Forbidden Planet artworks that we got from the first 2 series that are signed by Emma Vieceli. However, they don't have the face of Emma Vieceli as she put in the comic here.
No, they don't. Not all of them.
So I'm curious, where did the inspiration for your signature come from? Because it's a very unique signature.
Yeah.
It's even more amazing in all my comics because it's all identical, which was like unbelievable that you were doing that. And I didn't even notice you were doing them whilst we were talking.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration for your signature? Because it is very unique to draw it that way.
So it's been the same. I have signed things the same way for about 20 years. I will first of all apologize. The reason your book plates from Food and Planet do not have the full face on them is I had to sign 2,000 of those. So literally I was like, I think I put pictures up online at the time, these piles of things I had to sign, and I was like, I can't draw on every single one of those. I will kill myself. So they are slightly pared down. I think I put like just a flower or something on them. I definitely pared them down. But yeah, the full signature, in terms of inspiration, I don't know. But I started in comics through Sweatdrop, who are a UK studio / small publisher. We set up as a small publisher, yeah, like a long time ago, like 2004 or something like that. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it started that way. I think it must have been one time where I did it. I was always EMS, like EMS.
Yeah.
And then I think the first things I was signing. Actually, do you know what? You've made me think about it now. I think, so my first book that wasn't a Sweatdrop, but it was like a professional book, was Hamlet. It was the manga Shakespeare Hamlet. So like going back a long time. And I think the very first signing I had for it, I was so excited because this was like, oh my, I'm like a proper person with a book and I'm going to sign it. And you don't know how, you kind of assume, well, I'm probably only going to get 3 people who ever want it signed. So I'm going to give them the best signature. So I think I used to draw a little Hamlet. It was either Hamlet or Ophelia in it, just to give them like a full character, because I think in my mind, I thought, well, I'm only ever going to sign a few things, so I might as well make it worth it. Obviously, over the last 20 years, I've signed a few more, and it just sort of slowly became me instead of Hamlet or Ophelia. And yeah, it's just cute. It's something a bit personal, you know. Quite
It
hard
is
to
really
copy.
personal. Well, yeah, it is really personal. It's very cute because I think, as you said, these have got the flowers on them, so it's got the Emma signature and then the flowers on them. And I did see the Forbidden Planet covers that you've all signed with the faces, so I was like, okay, I was like wondering why she's not done the face, but then it makes sense you have 2,000 of them. So I completely understand that. And we'll come on to Hamlet later as well, because that does make a lot more sense with a reference we see in the Life is Strange comics.
Oh,
but
yeah.
we'll pick up on that a little bit more. But I want to talk to you about the comics as well, because you were recently at Showmasters in London.
Yeah.
And I was snooping through your stuff as well online, because I always do it for my interviews. And I noticed that you had cards of Life is Strange with just the banner at the top of it. I'm kind of curious. So it was like a white canvas and it just had these at the top.
Oh, they were the sketch covers. Yeah.
So do you do bespoke sketches for people who came to the table then?
So here's the thing. I haven't done convention sketches for a good 15 years or so, because when I'm at a convention, I like to talk to people, because that's kind of what I want to be there for, is interacting with people. And often I find if I'm doing sketches or commissions, you end up sort of just sitting there drawing. You don't get to talk to people. But when I was getting ready for LFCC, and I haven't done conventions anyway properly for a couple of years, I found this batch of, I think it's like 20 of them, of the sketch covers for Life is Strange. And I was like, oh, these are so special and they're so unusual. So yeah, I thought, well, okay, for the first time in ages, I'm going to offer. So it was a case of an in-person. If people came to the table, I wouldn't do them by post. I think I've done like 2 or 3 by post, but it's quite a lot. But if it's someone who's there and I can do it for them and they're happy to have something that I can do at the table for them. And actually I met a few lovely people at that event who had some really cool ideas as well. So I think I did a few of them that weekend. So they are incredibly unusual, I've got to say. And unfortunately, and again, if you're following me online, I did then have an EDS flare-up straight after, I think, because I spent a weekend like sketching with that. My poor body is just very fragile. I have a very careful work setup at home. So if I'm at a convention, it's sort of it's a terrible posture when you're sitting sketching at a convention. So I'm really glad I got to do some, because it is unusual, and I got to meet some really lovely people. It's not something that's going to happen super often, so they're quite rare.
I can imagine, because obviously I had like a look, and I think seems like you met a couple of Life is Strange fans there as well, and had photos of them. But I'm curious as well with the drawing as well, because as you said, it's a little bit unnatural to kind of just do it at bespoke process. Like, was it Life is Strange drawings you did on those cards? And were there any requests personally on any characters? Like, do you remember?
Yeah, so I think the favourite one of how it came out, there was a chap, I can't remember his name, and he had he'd sort of almost concepted stuff up. What he wanted is a bunch of Life is Strange art that crossed over with other things that he liked. And the one he gave me was it's like basically the classic X-Files pose of Mulder and Scully, but with Chloe and Max. So we discussed whether we'd have them in the black suits or whether we'd have them in their normal clothes. And it was really cool, actually. And I didn't know how it would come out exactly, because it was a bit of like a fusion of concepts. But actually it came out really well. So I enjoyed that. It was mostly Max's, I've got to say, which surprised me, because I think when I used to do Life is Strange sketching years ago, it was always Chloe.
Really?
I think I got one Rachel and a few Max's, and then a Max and Chloe.
Oh, that's interesting. That's like I would have got you to draw Gladys for myself, if anything. I'm a big fan of Gladys.
Oh God, whether I could draw Gladys, I don't know. God, Claudia made that thing amazing.
Well, we picked you apart as well last time when we spoke about what your strengths and weaknesses were with drawings. And I remember when I was with Jason at Traveling Man, I was like, there's Emma's comic, and I was like, there's a Vieceli nose. I was like, I know that from my experience of talking to her. I was like, she has a very distinct way of drawing people's facial features. So no, yeah, it's interesting. Maybe the Max bandwagon has come back because of the game, which again maybe we'll talk about later. Yeah. But speaking of which, let's talk about yourself, because obviously this has now come to an end. This is the Life is Strange volume series you worked on. 4 years. It was never even planned to be 6 volumes. It turned into 6 volumes. It took a big portion of your life up. I'm going to say that in a good way, obviously, because you were, people always take things totally wrong, but no, in a good way, because this was a big part of your life in terms of the series. But I kind of want to know, what was it like to finish this at the end of it and then kind of sign it off, because it was never this long as planned, but you kept the story going, you evolved it, you told Max and Chloe's story, Rachel's story, among many other characters. What was it like to kind of finally, be done with this?
It was insanely emotional. And it also was happening during a global pandemic, which obviously we are still in some ways. But it was happening I think we were like just towards the end of the lockdown, maybe. Were we? Yeah, I lose track of what the year is. But so not only did it become something, I mean, it will always mean so much to me. Like the franchise means a lot to me. The title means a lot to me. It was exciting to me to do 4 issues. It was exciting to me when we expanded that to whole series. When we expanded that to 2 series, and I got to tell. It was just an amazing experience, and getting to keep Claudia and Andrea on the whole time. So if you look around comics, the chances of having a consistent creative team for 4 years on a title, that does not happen. It just doesn't happen. So I kept waiting for the point when it was going to be like, oh yeah, we need to get another art team in. But it wasn't. It was all of it. We were just all on board 100%, you know? So getting to the end of it, when I started to feel like I knew that the threads, literally, like the threads were coming together, and when you're writing something, generally when it's a big story, if you have got this ending that you know you're aiming for, which I did, but by the time we extended past the first 4 issues, I always knew where I wanted that story to go. But in the world of comics, you kind of have it in your mind, and you have to temper that a little bit, because you don't know if you're going to get there, because comics get cancelled all the time. And especially when we started entering the lockdown and the early pandemics, we got a pencils down notice, which basically is when, so we weren't told we were cancelled, but we got a pause, and it was happening everywhere, because comics, the industry just ground to a halt. So people would just by the dozens, you know, checking in, comicers being like, we're off, we're cancelled, we're pencils down, and I was sitting there thinking, well, we're a licensed spin-off comic, you know, of a niche. Well, it's not niche. We know it's not niche, but to the outside world, it looks niche. So I think I kept thinking, we're gonna go down. There's no way we're getting to the end of this. So the fact that we didn't, so we were put on pause for, God, I think it was like 6 months or something. In the end, there was that break before the second season started, and when we got told, we're moving ahead, it was just this magical moment. And suddenly that ending that I'd had in my head, that I'd sort of started to try and pretend I didn't care too much about, because I didn't think I'd get to tell it, it was back. So then it started to become so clear in my head. And as we were, that last arc was so exciting. And when you've had it in your head that long, and you start to write those last scenes, there's some magical thing happens when you start to realize, oh my God, I'm doing it. I mean, it's like running a marathon and realizing you're actually going to cross the finish line, and what's that going to feel like? And will you have a big cup of tea afterwards? And there were points when I would write the last line of dialogue, say, for even the minor characters, you know, I'd be like, oh, well, that's the last thing Zach's going to ever say in the comic, or that's the last time Victoria's going to speak in the comic. And you get really emotional then, because you start to think, I'm never going to script anything for that character again. Yeah. That's it. They've done their bit. You know, it's like as if in film and TV when they have rap parties, it was like that. I almost saw it that way, that the the actress for Victoria is like, right, well, I'm done on set, mic down. So it was amazing getting to write those scripts. And then, of course, because I was always ahead of the rest of the team, I then got to watch the pages coming through. So, I will never forget being sent. I normally would only get issues when they were finished. But the only time I got sent pages while they were in progress was Phoebe, our editor for the end of the series, sent me the double page spread, which, with no spoilers, you can probably guess exactly the double page spread that I mean, where everything really came together. And I had been waiting 4 years to see that. And Claudia had been waiting 4 years to draw that. And so it was, it was absolutely amazing. My only sadness is that we got to the end of it in a time when the world was just shut down, you know, so I couldn't go to conventions, I couldn't speak to people, I couldn't kind of get excited about it in real life. All we had was Twitter. And it was a weird thing. I think I did the final cover and getting to I think I put that online, and I think I used my Ko-fi account or something and tried to do a post to try and say the emotions that were in me coming to the end of a 4-year series, and it was woefully inadequate, because it was just literally a couple of posts online to try and sum up a 4-year experience, when what we would have done would have been having sort of, you know, do a panel, do a session, go to events and celebrate the fact. We actually, to be fair, we did have a panel at MCM. We did I don't think we had finished it then. I think we were just about finishing it. So the last one wasn't out maybe at that point. And we did a panel, but it was, again, the world hadn't quite woken up yet. So the MCM, it was quite a small event by MCM standards. There weren't as many people there. But we had an amazing group for this sort of End of Life is Strange comic panel, and I played my ukulele on the stage because all the High Seas songs, I'd written the songs because that's how I was able to put the lyrics in the comic. So I got reminded of this by someone who came to LFCC, and I think I'd wiped it from my memory because there was a lot going on back then, and he was like, "Oh, I love that you got up and played a song on the ukulele." And I was like, "Oh no, I did." Like, how nerdy, how far on the nerd scale can we go? It's pretty nerdy. So that was the only chance we had to see people, like in real life, to celebrate it. I would have liked to do more, get Claudia back over, do another event, but it was not the right time in the world. So for a comic that was always occupying this unusual space where those who knew, but there were an awful lot who didn't, it's almost fitting for it in a way that in the world storm, it just sort of slipped out, and now people are starting to find it more, I think.
Yeah, which, as you said, it's a bit of a shame. Like, that really did curtail so many years, even like just coverage of like Life is Strange and many other things as well. And for yourself as well, it did feel like you guys wanted a panel. I mean, I would have paid good money to see the video of you in the ukulele. If that ever comes up online, Emma, please post it as well so we can all watch it, because I think the High Seas have the perfect tribute there of a ukulele rendition of their song. So I would recommend you post that somewhere.
It was a very silly thing to do.
I think it was a perfect thing to do. I'm going to counteract that, and I've not even heard it yet. So, Emma, at this point, I'm going to move into spoiler territory. So basically, guys, we have a full interview with Emma before on volumes 1 to 3. If you do wonder why things aren't talked about, we've covered a lot of things. Emma's talked about Claudia's wonderful artwork in there, among many other things, even other characters as well. So do go and check that out, because I'm not going to go over it, because we'll be here for about 5 or 6 hours otherwise. And I think the best thing to do, Emma, is to start with this, because we're going to go on 4, 5, 6 volumes, 4, 5, and 6.
Spoiler, yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to carry on from here, because I think the first thing I noticed immediately was when I started volume 4, even from the first couple of pages, it was like, we now bring in elements from Before the Storm and True Colors. So it's almost the Deck 9 elements of their games that are coming in. You previously dabbled with Don't Nods games. I'm kind of curious, like, what was it like when you started approaching that element? Because we now have 2 timelines running in synergy, and you obviously bring in another character, fan favorite, which is Steph Gingrich, and you're now dabbling into it. Like, what did you do in terms of getting yourself prepared for it? Did you go back and play those games? Did you research them? And then was it like managing those 2 timelines in sync as well?
There's a lot of things to weave. In terms of Steph, for me, was really easy to bring in. She always stood out for me anyway, as a side character from the games, and because of the nature of her character, the moment I think she was one that was suggested by them. I think because they knew she was going to be in the new game, it was one of those examples where they said, "Can we weave something in?" And I think there was probably a little part of me was thinking, "Oh my God, our cast is so big already. We don't need another one." But actually, when they said it was her, I was like, "Well, actually, that's kind of perfect," because I had it. I can't remember if we ended up printing it or not. Do you know what? It's been that long. I can't remember what the free comic book day story I ended up going with was. Was it the one about, does she talk to Pixie? Is it Steph and Pixie?
Yeah, so I was going to come on to it, but I'll bring it in here. So it's basically a D&D style panel, which you've done, where it's very similar to what she's doing Before the Storm, and she's basically relaying all the events up the story up to the final volume.
Right, because we pitched a few. I couldn't remember what you went with.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically it was so easy to bring her in, because I was like, oh, what would be really fun is it makes perfect sense that Pixie would know her, because I knew from Square that Steph was living in Seattle, or had lived in Seattle. She was part of like the music scene. She's obviously a big tabletop nerd, and I was like, oh, well, this is super easy. She would 100% have crossed paths with the High Seas. The High Seas, if I could go back and shake the hand of Emma from whatever year it was we started, and just say thank you for creating the High Seas, because literally they were these 4 people who became so useful, because even something like that, I could have justified her knowing one of the main girls and main characters, but it would have felt a little bit more shoehorned, I think. Whereas knowing that like we've literally got this bunch of characters who are hanging out in Seattle, they play music, one of them's a D&D player. There were so many access points that they gave me of reasons they could be places, or reasons people would know each other. So she was made useful, like made easy, because of Pixie, actually. And I can't remember if I said it in the comic, but the deal was that she was GMing or DMing for Pixie, and Pixie's teaching her the drums, which I really like. And there's a comic in itself. And in terms of the true colours element, that wasn't so, other than Steph obviously entering the main story, just to sort of bring her back into the consciousness, I think. But for me, again, it was super useful because the fact that I already had a Shakespeare production going on, I was like, oh, well, it just, everything was, the synergy was really easy. It felt natural that, of course, her and Chloe would talk about their Shakespeare time. That's my husband in the background. Special guest star. So yeah, but in terms of Alex and stuff, we, as you'll have seen, people have read the comic, it was more that we did that as a side story. So what was pitched to us was, we got to see a lot of what was coming with True Colours. So I remember watching like an early demo of it, and we got like some of the Bible of like what was the plans were, and they said what we need is her intro, basically, like give us her journey to get there, and sort of establish her and her brother's relationship. So yeah, it was nice. It was just a sort of fun side thing, really. So she didn't really tangent in with our main story. It was very much a sort of off to the side. But again, I liked feeling like it meant that the comic was being seen as a vessel that could be used to sort of set up into the new game. It was always nice whenever we had anything that crossed over between the two. Yeah, was that your main question there? It was like how to bring in the different.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting that you mentioned the high seas, because I kind of see what you've done now as well. Because I was wondering, we'll come on to Pixie in a little bit, but it's like the way that they kind of take such a big center stage in the story. And I see, like, how did you manage, like, this will kind of go off on tangent, but how did you manage some of the characters? So, for example, obviously Rachel Amber's my favorite character. I told you that, but she kind of takes a little bit of I wouldn't say a backseat role. She kind of like withdraws herself in a kind of good way, where it's like, there's moments where, for example, Max and Chloe are fighting and she's like, you two sort it out and I'm going to go off, and she wanders away. But you kind of have to basically have this juggling act where you have so many different storylines with characters and you like balancing them out. How did you decide like which characters kind of like move out of the frames in the right timing, and how was the kind of process with that? Because obviously if I'm a huge Rachel fan, I'm like, what's Emma doing here? She's taking Rachel out of it. I'm like angry. I'm not doing that, but it's just like in the sense that you think about all these main characters you have, and obviously Steph is a main character in itself, and you use her sparingly. And I think obviously I'll come on to it in a minute, but like I'm just kind of curious, how did you manage those characters? And like, when you're thinking like, I would love to write more about Rachel, but you need to come out of this frame at the moment.
Actually, surprisingly, I mean, juggling the timelines and keeping track of all my plot lines, that was like a Herculean task. But in terms of the balance of when I focused on which characters, it surprisingly wasn't that hard, because it was always Max's story. So it was whatever served Max's story. It was Max and Chloe's story. So Rachel, I loved getting to use Rachel the way I did, getting the chance to give her that life that she never really got. That was amazing for me. But even that life was sort of there to highlight what Max didn't have. So it was always told through a lens of what's Max feeling right now, where's she sitting in this story, and it was the overall goal was always to get her and Chloe back together. So it was sort of everyone else in the story, even like major players like Tristan, I want everyone to be alive. Every character I write is alive, and they all have their own story, whether they reference it a lot or a little. They've all got stuff going on in their heads, which is why I always wanted to have these pull-out moments, like I think we talked about it last time, but Rachel at the door with her realization. Like, you have to have people having they're all alive, they're not just bit parts. And I wanted it to be like a rich world where you could see every single one of those characters. Dwight and Tammy might go for a coffee and you can at least try and guess what they would talk about, So they were all alive, but yeah, ultimately they were there to facilitate the main story. So when it came time, especially towards, the end of the comic, I had Rachel take it literal, really, where she was like, this is your story. And she is self-aware enough to know that also, let's face it, maybe she doesn't want to go and stand out in a storm. Maybe she's just like, hell no, I'm not going out there. That's crazy. Why would I do that? But I think it spoke volumes of her as a person and how she'd grown, that she was able to say, I realise that there's something going on here that I don't need to be part of, and I trust you guys to do this. So, so it was a lot of characters to juggle, no question. And I think probably my proudest achievement in it, and over the whole time, is the weaving of the storylines. And you'll laugh because he's such a small character, but it's Lawrence. It's what Lawrence did for the story. Is I knew that I needed, and it was slow. It was a slow build, and it was really difficult. And you should see the level of files and spreadsheets I had. But I needed something so distinct, but not too bad, but something that was different between the timelines, that over the course of the entire first arc could shift a reality in one direction. And Lawrence slipping off of that cliff, he was fine. He was injured, but in one world, Max rewound it, and in another, she didn't. And what I wanted was just something where we could watch. If you took the time to pay attention, you could watch how that rippled out. And the fact that actually it's the world where she didn't rewind time, where him and Tristan end up happy and together and in love and everything's fine, whereas the one where she did rewind time to make things better is where maybe his life was a little bit sadder. And so that was like a little subplot. It was only a small subplot, but I think it was things like that to be honest, right now I don't think my brain could do it. I think, like, I was a few years younger, maybe my brain was firing on more had more going on. But I can look back at that now and go, oh, well played. That's quite complicated. But he did his job,
So I'm actually going to go on a bit of a tangent here, because I was going to bring in Lawrence later because of Tristan.
Oh, okay.
Tristan is the first trans character in the Life is Strange series.
Tristan isn't, Dex is.
Sorry, Dex is. Dex is the first trans... muddling myself up here in different times. So Dex is one of the first trans characters. Yeah. So Dex is one of the first trans characters you have in there. So you had a big diverse cast of characters in there. And with Tristan in himself as well, he was a very unique character. He kind of positioned himself almost like this way, like almost like Rachel. He was important to the story. He's elementary, like mainly there. But in the actual comics, one thing I found very interesting was the fact that Pixie says, I look into the future, and we'll come on to Pixie's power in a minute. Pixie's like, I look into the future, I can't see where you're at in the timeline, like which timeline you're at. And then obviously Tristan decides his timeline, has a relationship with Lawrence. Was also Lawrence part of that weave that you eventually got to, that I'm going to make sure that Tristan's in this universe? Because ultimately it's Emma Vieceli who's making the decision to put Tristan into a universe. It's not out of his choice. So, like, where was the decision on that? Was it because of Lawrence you thought, actually, I can weave Tristan in here and be like, that's his end of his story as well?
Yeah, I don't remember which order I decided stuff. I knew I wanted Tristan to go with Max. I wanted Tristan to be... He is a boy out of his world. Like, he's the... As Pixie realizes, he's the only version of him that survived, which makes him incredibly unusual. Like, most people are going to have multiple versions of themselves living different lives. He doesn't. He's it. And that's why he's able to do what he does. And I knew that I wanted him to end the story in a different place to where he started. I think there was a lot, maybe it says something about the times we were living through as well, but there was a lot of stuff in that comic on a subconscious level about just wanting to be somewhere else, like being able to start again somewhere else. And who could we be if we didn't have any of the trappings of the life we've had so far? We didn't have anyone left who knows us. What can you become? And Tristan's completely reborn in those comics. And so it made sense to me that he would go into a different world. And also, I think there was always a little part of me back then where I wasn't sure where we would take the comic afterwards, whether I would do any more. So for a purely logistic point of view, it was nice to have him where Max was, because it meant that if they needed to team up again, they were there. I mean, obviously he could come from anywhere, but so I liked the idea of him settling somewhere. And then I didn't want it just to be that he was going because of Max. I think even though Max is what she is and the stories around her, as I said before, I wanted people to have their own lives, so they don't just go, I'm going to do that because Max is doing that. So I wanted them to have something else, and Lawrence was just the perfect foil for that. So it was just this lovely, sweet little side love story that ends very happily for them. So
it does end very happily. And with this series as well, you kept saying as well, it is Max's story because it ultimately is that character that's the main focus. And Emma Vieceli has a first in this series, entire Life is Strange series, in the sense that this is the first time Rachel Amber, for example, crosses paths with Max, but also as well, Steph Gingrich crosses paths with Max, which is another first in the series. I was kind of like curious, how do you feel like making those moments, and especially, for example, with Steph coming in and be like with Max, because there's no technically like continuity linking those characters, because Steph was a character introduced later from Deck 9, but you can now kind of give it a little bit of substance in a story of the Life is Strange universe. Like, what was it like bringing those two characters together?
So cool.
Quite brief.
Really cool, but I had to keep reminding myself, you know, it was weird to me. I think, in fact, my memory of it is they meet. So it's at the festival, isn't it? They're on the beach, and isn't there like, I feel like there's something like Pixie and Chloe, or people are like, oh yeah, no, we've met. Oh, you've met, and then someone says, oh, well, I guess we don't need introductions, and Max is like, I do. Because even for me, I was realizing, oh my God, Max doesn't know Steph. It's like in real life, you know, through comics, I'll go to conventions and I'll be like, oh wait, you don't know you? Oh, that's weird that you don't know each other. So you kind of assume, well, they're all Life is Strange, they must all know each other. But I was always very adamant of keeping it as true to the core license as I could. So I wasn't going to have characters who mysteriously knew each other. I didn't want to brush that away either, like make it just now they know each other. So it was hard work, but it was interesting trying to keep in my head, especially when I had to remember that in one universe the storm had happened, in another it hadn't. So who knows who? Like, who remembers who? Like, I remember things like having Steph and Chloe refer back to the Tempest production, like having to remember, no, Steph did know about the production. Who else did know? Like, just having to constantly, every time I would refer to something, I had to go back, reference, and check who knew about that, who didn't know about that. Which again is nice with people at the high seas, because for the most part they don't know anything about anything. But anything that's happening to do with the music scene in Seattle, they're very handy.
And Emma as well, on top of that as well, because like obviously you have like the great people at Titan and like Square Enix to kind of like, you know, check over everything, make sure everything's all like, you know, in sync in terms of like thing. But I'm kind of curious, like when you're doing stuff like that, I was like looking through every comic like panel and not trying to like pluck you out and be like, Emma's made a mistake here. But it's like, you know, Rachel Amber's tattoos there, for example, like on her leg. But it's like things can easily get lost in this universe.
So
and then people will like jump on you and be like, well, Emma Vieceli's never played the game because she's like left off Rachel's tattoo. It's just like, do you like human error? We all make human error.
Of course, yeah.
Well, I'm kind of curious, like when you were making notes as well, when you're making characters like Lawrence, you're making this, did you ever like make notes underneath them saying like, this needs to be like, you know, emphasized, this needs to be like put in here, not in the sense like Chloe's hair needs to be different because we've seen the two Chloes, but it's like little characteristics. Like, how did you keep on top of those and like to make sure they were checked? Because it could easily be quite lost in translation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time, genuinely, I can't speak highly enough of Claudia and Andrea. Like, a lot of the time, I just didn't need to, because, and we've said it, I know we repeat it all the time over the years, but everyone involved with that comic was such a fan of the games. So it wasn't like if I'd had an artist who was just, you know, work for hire, oh, what's this? It's about a game called Life is Strange, cool, and I'd had to dictate everything, then I think probably maybe more mistakes would have happened. As it was, Claudia was such a huge fan of the games anyway, like she knew them back to front, we both did. So there were certain things like with some of the characters I did, with new characters like the Hamlet characters, I did design sheets for them. And in fact, the first time they came into the comic, I drew those pages just because for scheduling purposes. I think there were a couple of pages, so I jumped in and did the pencils for Claudia to ink over. So we had... And Claudia was very good. She did design sheets for everything. But it would have been incredibly easy to like, oops, in one panel, Rachel's missing her tattoo or something, you know, so easy. And that does happen with human error all the time. I'm literally drawing one of the new things I'm doing at the moment. I've got a character who's got a mole on one cheek, and I know he's going to have that mole is going to jump around. So it does happen, but A, Claudia was incredible, and B, I think we'd put so much more pressure on ourselves, or rather I'd put pressure on all of us because of our opening arc. Because when you're playing with continuity in the way we did in Dust, when you're relying on the fact that if a streak of hair changes colour, that's not a mistake, that's a flicker. You know, if that bit of graffiti on the wall changes slightly, that's a flicker. It sort of meant that we couldn't mess up in that way, because if you did, you might have readers going, oh, it's a flicker to a world where Rachel didn't have the tattoo. Like, so we did, certainly made it harder on ourselves. But I mean, it may well be that there were some moments lost, may well be. There were a lot of pages drawn, but for the most part, I remember whenever I would look over a panel, I was just always blown away that Claudia was so on it, you know. Really impressive.
Yeah, I didn't notice anything there. I was just curious because, like, obviously, as you said, like the continuity has to just be kept throughout the entire thing. It's just like it could, when you're juggling all those characters as well, it makes sense. But
So
in
much.
itself,
Well, we messed with it. Like there's when Max and Tristan have been training and they're showing Max and Chloe. They're showing Chloe and Rachel how they've been doing, and there's like one panel where the hat jumps from Chloe onto Max. It's only for a panel, so it's, you know, but again, it's things like that. We could use that in a sort of visual effect that you can do in comics so nicely. So yeah, we had to be super careful because if we were going to make something switch continuity, it had to be for a reason.
no, for sure, and obviously in that universe that you have when you're messing with so many characters in like a good way, where it's like two timelines are running, we meet loads of characters from the universe. So obviously, we have Brody meeting Rachel, which is like again two collisions of worlds there. We have Alyssa returning when she appears in the when Max and Chloe reunite in Arcadia Bay. I'm kind of curious, like, what was it like bringing some of these cameo characters in, and then like, were you responsible for picking these ones, being like, I want Alyssa, I want Brody, and I want to like,
Yeah, I had like a very small. We got bigger as we went, but I mostly had a list of characters we couldn't use. So, for instance, now the comic's finished, I can say Kate was off the table. We were never going to be able to use Kate in the comics. To be fair, in the very beginning, I was told Victoria was off the table, and then as time went on, like because they were developing as well at the same time, so obviously lines would move a bit as Square were doing stuff their side. Obviously, we ended up we were able to use Victoria. Brody, the reason he's in it is my original pitch for that whole storyline. Because you know the girl, they go to El Paso. One of the gig nights is El Paso, and it's no coincidence they were doing that because they were going to meet the brothers there. And I think because we have to remember that those comics were being written literally while I think like Life is Strange 2 hadn't come out while we were working on some of those issues. So it was a bit of a juggling thing where I was really keen because I knew what was coming, and so I wanted to like bring them in, but it might be like, well, we can't quite do that yet. And it was trying to work out how our real life timelines could fit together so that I wasn't treading on anything the game was doing and the game wasn't denying anything the comic was doing. So it was quite hard. So there were some of them were things where I'd bend from like, okay, I get that I can't use them, but can I at least put Brody in? Because then it gives like a connection to that game, just to sort of acknowledge it's part of the world. And again, it was one of those nice things where actually it made sense that Brody and Rachel would know each other in that universe through both being online and blogging, and like it made sense that they'd have a connection. Who was the other one you said? Oh, Alyssa was, that was very much me. That was I I just wanted to give Alyssa a bit of I wanted her. She had such a crap time of it in the game, you know? And the idea that after all that, she was just a person who died. I was like, no, I know, it's too sad. So, and also I wanted a lot of what I got to do in the comics with characters like Victoria especially was give them a bit of a redemption arc in hopefully not too forced a way, but show that everyone could live.
I was going to go into that as well. So should we just talk about that? Because I was going to say, like, obviously Victoria is a bigger character in terms of the ones that you can take an option out of. And obviously in there as well, you have like, again, you make first moments. So you get to like explore the chase space, for example. Like we didn't really see that, but then there's even like, I had to take moments like where it's quite bizarre in a good way, where I'm seeing like Chloe and Victoria talking, and it's the same kind of like Rachel, Max kind of dynamic where you have source materials to draw from, but you are basically creating your own, and you have to rewrite the character in the sense of this is how the character is post whatever's happened in that universe. So like, how was it writing her? Because obviously, as you said, you didn't have the chance before, but then you have now, and she plays a big part in the last 3 arcs of the comic as well.
It was. Again, it was just, I just keep saying it was brilliant. Anything I got to play with from the game was great. Victoria was such a strong character, obviously, in the game. You just hated her. But I think everyone is capable of redemption, and everyone, if given the chance to make different choices, can live better. And I think that's sort of, for me, what one of the cruxes of the first game is. Max makes different choices, and hopefully they make some things better. But she's the only one who gets to do that in the first game. And I think the fact that Victoria, I think because when we started, Square's line on it was pretty much in this universe where Chloe's alive, everyone died. Like you know, Warren is dead, Kate is dead. You can't use them. Well, actually, Kate wasn't. But yeah, you can't use them. But I think it was a little while later, and I forget now which order it happened, whether it was me who brought it up or someone else brought it up. But we were like, yeah, but if Victoria was in the bunker, she wouldn't be. And I think maybe there was a chance, especially now we know what they're up to now. It's possible that they'd been figuring out where she would sit in stuff. But for whatever reason, there came a point where they said, you know what, yeah, okay, go with that, and you can use her with that understanding. And so then when you start to pass her as a character who, for all that she was in the first game, she's someone who ended that storyline terrified on her own in a bunker, and at some point emerging from that bunker to find that her town and most people she knew were gone. Like, that's the idea of being able to then use her in any way meant a lot, because it gave her that opportunity to be something more than that. And I really liked where we took her, and the fact that she happened to have access to a gallery. I think there was even it was really satisfying for me, because I seem to remember, and this is going back, that in Dust, when they get to the to the actual memorial event, I literally had someone in front of them in the queue when they said, "What's your name?" They said Chase. Because I saw it as like it would be an aunt or an uncle or some, because they like a family is more than just like her and her parents or something. And I think even back then there were like readers commenting on the fact that, oh, there's someone called Chase. There was a lot of stuff that was quite satisfying when I was able to go, okay, let's bring that in for real. So yeah, getting to work with her was great. I loved how I was able to use, again, I like weaving things, and I really liked that though he was a side character, what having Zach in the universe meant for Victoria, how it let her see someone who was sort of a mirror of what she used to be, and how the person she is now can see that in a way she didn't before. But even he gets his little redemption, even he's like, actually, I'm not a complete arsehole, So, yeah, and I think she really comes through for Arcadia Bay and for Max and Chloe in the end. So, yeah, it's nice.
Oh, for sure. It was really cool just to see, and then obviously all the stuff that sets up in that with the chase space and Max visiting it, giving photos, which is really quite cool dynamic. So it's really cool that you had the opportunity to explore that character and had that much time with it. I'm going to take you a bit further as well now into Max and Chloe as well, which is that, obviously we had the themes of the pirates. It's kind of rallied through the entire volumes, if anything. But then there's also a little bit of a scene where you have a Wild Wild West setting as well. Yeah. And the characters get ready for that. But I thought it was a very special scene in there, which is where Max and Rachel are getting changed, and Rachel is kind of speaking to Max about her Chloe, and it's obviously been years now, like Max has been stuck in this timeline, and then there's kind of like this essence of like Max kind of like very much explicitly saying to this Rachel, your Chloe is your Chloe, my Chloe is my Chloe. And then also as well, even the fact that Rachel kind of alludes to the kind of fact of like, you should tell this Chloe that you are lovers and the other one. I kind of wanted to break you into that kind of, obviously, because I feel like that scene, and especially with the fandom as well, it's like almost Price Field where they have like Max and Chloe together. That was like kind of like a really layered scene where it's like, in a sense, you have Max and Rachel basically speaking about Chloe, and they both have a deep appreciation for their own Chloe, but they're not making the decision to reveal it to this Chloe. And I'm kind of curious, was that an initial decision that you had straight away where it's like, I don't want this Chloe to know ever that, for example, Max and Chloe in that out of the universe are kind of like lovers, if anything, because obviously fast forward, we get back to Arcadia Bay. There's a photo left for Tristan has left a photo for Max and Chloe, and it's kind of revealed that, Max and Chloe and Rachel spent time together. So I'm kind of curious how you managed that scene. Like, what was there a big decision behind being like, actually, this Chloe doesn't need to know about them in the other universe?
I get really emotional actually even thinking about that scene a little bit. I think because getting, as you said earlier on, getting to introduce Max and Rachel to each other was quite a huge deal. This is Rachel's someone who, even by her absence, shaped a lot of Max's experiences. And so to bring them together was quite a big deal. But I wanted them to have something that was more than just, by convenience, we happen to be characters from games who know each other. And I wanted to sort of highlight that this version of Rachel she's quite empathic. Like she's quite thoughtful, and she sees things, and which I really like that as a sort of because of her kind of influencer life and to be an actor, you got to have empathy. And there was something really cool with her about being able to play with this dual life she lives, of this sort of seemingly shallow online life and actually who she really is. And I think the reason that scene got me emotional is it was the fact that Max had never intended to tell either of them, because you know, Max is Max. She's going to throw herself on the fire any time. Like, she's not going to go, actually, I'm really sad because I actually really love the version of you. She was never going to put them in that awkward situation. And I really loved the fact that Rachel was the one who went, I think I've just realised. I think I know what she is to you. And despite the fact that we've known each other a couple of years, I had no idea how painful it's been for you every single day. And yeah, so it was just this really lovely chance for Max to have her sorry, tickly throat. Max to have her release, because the person she would have wanted to talk to if she's hurting would be Chloe. And Chloe is her best friend in that timeline, but Chloe's the one person she can't talk to. And yes, Tristan arriving helped. It gave her an outlet, but ultimately she didn't have anyone to have that conversation with. And so there was something really poignant to me about that person being Rachel. Like, that's the person she talks to. So yeah, it was just a really emotional moment. I remember being quite upset when I was writing that bit of script, actually. Just a connection between them, and done in a way I never wanted. When we knew what was going on with that, I say second series, it wasn't second series, it's from Waves onwards, but as soon as we knew that was the setup, I never wanted the story to be born out of any rivalry or bitterness or jealousy, because that was really low-hanging fruit. That was really like, sure, I could have told that story really easily, but it wouldn't have satisfied me in the same way. I wanted drama to come out of life and things that individuals are facing, rather than just let's have these guys hate each other. So I really enjoyed being able to give them that connection instead.
No, and it was, the payoff was amazing as well, because you see it in especially those scenes. And I'm going to bring a later question earlier here, which is obviously, as you said, there's some really deep emotional moments in this entire like last run of it. Which is the one that really pulled your heartstrings? Was it that, or was it, for example, Max and Chloe like merging back together in that timeline? Like, so I imagine that you were probably like, as you said, those moments, even the ending as well for the series, for example, like you've kind of like alluded to loads of scenes, but which is the one that really was like the really heart wrencher for you, where you're like, you've written the.
So literally, when I write scripts, I read them out, because I want to make sure the rhythm sounds right and that the voices sound right. So quite embarrassingly, I act out all my scripts to myself. So when people talk about, oh, didn't she get the voice of X down? I'm like, oh God, that's good, because it's basically me doing a horrible impression of them in my on my own, trying to make sure like the rhythm of the dialogue sounds all right and sounds like them. So because of that, sometimes I get emotional as I was writing things, and sometimes it would be as I was reading it back. That's when it would hit me. And I think probably the biggest cry I had, unsurprisingly, was reading Max's last speech. It was that, her like monologue about Arcadia Bay, and some of the sentiments in that just slayed me. Especially because, again, I was writing it at a time when the whole world was upside down. Like, we were all sad. We were all losing people. We were all like, this pandemic was tearing through the world. And then I'm sitting there writing about loss. And so that got me. I think similarly, the little page at the Hurricane Katrina monument, when Max speaks to the woman outside the monument there, just because of the sentiment and that idea of that be selfish grief, and how that doesn't mean you can't grieve on a larger scale. I think, there were so many moments. The Rosemary for Remembrance, I think, when having that envelope that just said Rosemary for Remembrance, and it having the photos in it, and Chloe getting to see those photos. There was loads. It was an emotional comic, I think I cried quite a lot making that comic. So take from that what you will about the state of my mind.
Well, no, because it does seem like obviously the setup is there from our first 3 volumes, and we spoke about like all the other intricate details, but this one was like just basically like relationships form, relationships break, things keep moving forward. So I kept feeling like almost like a seesaw where I kept going up and down in terms of like the way that I kind of
well, there was
got.
one particular seesaw, which is probably obvious when you're reading it, because we kept, in the nicest way, we kept getting extended, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But it does mean that sometimes you are having to go, okay, seesaw again, and literally the point when and again, like before I've said, I'm actually glad the way it worked out because I got to do more. But I genuinely thought Max was going back when the four of them are on the beach, and it's with Tristan there as well. At the point when I think I was writing up to that scene, I think we thought, this is it. She's going home. And we've done a lot of work to get to that point, to then at the 11th hour get told, nope, keep it going a bit more. Something like, oh, right, okay. So sometimes the seesaws genuinely were seesaws. All of them in the end worked out better for the story because we got more time to tell more stories. So we got to like do more emotion. But yeah, I remember that one being being quite a funny one.
No, for sure, and people find that with TV shows as well. It's not just a comic book thing. Like the seasons get renewed, and the writers have already written the ending, and it's like, and we move back. Yeah, for sure. So I completely understand that, and I'm going to make this completely a complete left turn here because obviously Pixie, you really like writing Pixie. I remember you saying that you really appreciate like kind of the diversity that she brings to the roster characters. Her drumsticks are always great as well to see her with those. But like in itself, she develops a lot more. You give her a big backstory. She also has powers, as we learn in this as well. So we start seeing the kind of expansion of people like Tristan has powers, Max has powers, and Pixie has powers. Was this always the thing for you out of Pixie? Because as you said, you had a nice kind of like wedge there with the high seas, and they basically allowed you to start merging timelines, breaking timelines, moving things along. But then Pixie, like out of all of them, is like, okay, I'm going to take a bit more of a central role. Was that always your plan to have her there, and then also to kind of like get the powers with her and kind of like bleed that into the actual comics?
Yeah, I hadn't solidified 100% at the beginning how she was going to have powers. I knew she was special because ultimately because I wanted my cake and I wanted to eat it too. Because we were set in a different universe, but I wanted to write songs for this band that had a poignancy to Max's story. And it would have, I mean, it could have been a hell of a coincidence, but the fact that some of the lyrics in this song, that Ghost in Your Own Time is literally a song about Max and Chloe. And I think if I'd written that and there had never been a reason why Pixie just out of nowhere wrote that song, you're like, whoa, that's so bizarre that she happened to be able to do that. So to be honest, originally, I think I was vaguely playing with the idea that she was just someone who was sensitive to, she would dream and see other possibilities or something, and that was why she was quite creative, because I think I was playing with this notion of like we can all tap into other, like when we have crazy dreams or when we have a really mad deja vu, what if that is us just having a flicker, like stepping over into something that's happened in another universe, another possibility. So I think I just saw her as almost like, if it was Star Wars, she's force sensitive, and then as we got more and more chances to tell more story and I needed more meat to put in the sandwich, then it was like, oh, actually now I can really boost her a bit more, and as you say, by the end they all became instrumental, because if you didn't have the trilogy of like her, Max and Tristan, it couldn't have happened, which was really nice. But yeah, so initially it was more just I wanted her to have some sort of sensitivity to other things, that she was able to write lyrics that would hit home for Max, basically.
And to include that as well, because there's a big thing with Max, which is a little bit twist in the story, where she develops a new power, which is called pocket time.
Yeah.
So we see it very subtly, where it's the coffee goes from cold to warm, and it's kind of that her power has evolved in terms of that she can basically rewind certain elements, not the entire thing, but just certain elements. Emma Vieceli, was that your idea? Was that something you kind of put forward? We need to kind of know the details about that, because that is the true evolution of Max's power in this story, at least, if anything.
Yeah, I'm proud of pocket time, actually, because I mean, you'd seen in the comic up to then, I'd already been playing with the idea. I mean, Max is guilt personified. That's what she is. And she has that argument with Chloe when she rewinds the accident, where Chloe's saying, like, you don't get to play God. You don't get to decide which bits of people's lives they live or not. And so I'd already been setting that up as a storyline, like as a point of what's the word I'm looking for? It was like a point of contention that that's something Max is aware of. And it was the other reason I was using the Lawrence storyline to sort of show what happens when she does and doesn't rewind things. And so basically I needed to resolve that in some way. But I wanted her still, I didn't want to just take her powers away. Or rather not me take her powers away, but her take her own powers away, because she'd already been doing that. She tried the limiting thing. She thought she had more control over things. And Chloe kind of reminds her that actually whether she can control it or not isn't the big question. It's whether she should. And the beauty with Pocket Time is it gives her an opportunity to affect the world around her without taking other people's choices away. And that to me became so important because I think because of the way I'd been writing it and the kind of threads I'd been following, I didn't like the idea of Max being someone who literally takes people's choices away. Like someone might choose to do something in their life and she can rewind it. And that's sinister, you know? So I wanted this, I wanted her to kind of refine. And it made sense to me with the like weird fantasy science logic that it's just about refining down so that you're narrowing that field of what the power can do. And so the first time she does it is with the cup of coffee, but then because she realizes that's something she can do, she can isolate the sort of meteorological elements that make a storm and rewind them without having to rewind the experiences of all the people around them. And that for me was really exciting.
No, it was an interesting twist to put onto that, and I thought it was quite a nice like way to continue the story as you were going and like giving her something completely different. So Emma, one of the things I wanted to ask you, so obviously Pocket Time's a really neat idea for that Max than the story you put in her, but then there's other questions that people have. For example, when Max and Chloe are sitting in like the flat, for example, and they're looking at photos, we know Max has the power to rewind a photo, for example. She's done it before. The implications were quite great. And then also as well, like, you know, she does rewind time quite a few times. She nosebleeds. And I alluded to it very early on in this chat where I was like, you aren't going to just make, you know, inaccurate errors or like, and I'm not saying this is an inaccurate error, but you're not going to make some oversight on Max because obviously you've like studied this character, you've lived with her for 4 years, written her. Why was there not a reason to mainly maybe explore that, for example, even if it was like a momentary slip of like Max rewinding that photo, like a little Polaroid and being like, oh, you know, and I'm not trying to be Emma Vieceli and say that I'm going to write this and it's going to be a better thing, but just other elements. Because I really like, for example, when you wrote Chloe, and she gets a little bit cutthroat, for example, with Max being like, you can't play God, you can't do this. It's like things have to play out. But I'm kind of curious, like, for example, why you didn't go down that route with like Max. Maybe
which photo do you mean? Do you mean at the end when they're looking at which?
Yeah. So they're looking at Polaroids, but she has the power to basically like rewind Polaroids if she wants to. But like, would there be a reason why you wouldn't want to do that at any other point in the comics, or you decide not to do that?
I think there's two big reasons. One is that one of the last times she tried changing time by using a photo, it was horrific. Like that's gonna stay with her. I think and part of the whole point of the comic series is she's kind of trying to atone for the fact that it's chaos theory. It's literally the butterfly effect, that one small change for her might be something huge for someone else, and she's always wrestling with that. So for her, even if if she'd found the perfect, happy, smiling photo of the entire class at Arcadia Bay before the storm, and she had the opportunity of going in there and rewinding time to that moment, changing how things played out from there, there's an element for her, as she is in the comic, that's whatever we are by that point, we're talking 6 years of life and 6 years of decisions and compound changes and how they've ended up. And I think the things she learns over the course of the comics, and the things that Chloe brings her up on and like really calls her out on, is fine. She might have been able to go back and make it so that people didn't die in Arcadia Bay. What would that mean going forward? What would that mean for I'm trying to think of a random in one of the flickers where Dana has a baby. Does Dana still have that baby? Do the high seas ever form? Does Tristan manage to phase out in the one timeline he's in? Like it's sort of, she's always got that weight in her head now of any decision I make, even if for me personally I want that particular thing to change, just like she did with Chloe's dad. Look at what that led to. So I think a big part of it will be that the last time she did do that, it went badly. And the other thing is just that she's learning, she's evolving as a character. I think if she decided after all she'd learned in the comic and even just from the very beginning of Dust, she's had a year that we don't see of having to process that guilt on what happened. I think if she then, like, after everything in the comic went, and now I'm going to go back in a photo, it would just, she wouldn't have learned anything, you know? So it's, to use the classic Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. And she's learning the responsibility, I think.
For sure, and I like that. And I'm going to switch gears completely here in terms of, for example, like I kind of did a lot of snooping again, and then I realized you have a big theatre background in terms of I've seen you on some of those like stages, and obviously we've kind of spoke about it before. Hamlet comes in, you've kind of told me that now you have like a, you know, writing history of that, and obviously it takes center stage in the comics as well. So obviously we had the Tempest in Before the Storm, we have in Hamlet in here. I'm kind of curious, like, what was it like to bring that to life? Because obviously you have experience with that, and also as well, just out of curiosity, did you consider any other plays, or was it just always Hamlet?
It was always Hamlet, and it was because of Ophelia. I think so Hamlet, I'm quite close to Hamlet anyway, because as you say, my first ever book was drawing Hamlet to Richard Opinionesi did the adaptation, but so I directed it, so I drew it. So, and I studied Hamlet in A levels. I had an amazing teacher back at A levels who like used to be a proper sort of, he'd jump on the tables and get excited about stuff. So he made me really care about Hamlet. So I love it as a play anyway, but I knew it had to be Hamlet, because one of the things that always stuck out to me with Hamlet was exactly what I talk about in the comic, I think, which is that notion of why Ophelia is across history and literature canon, she is this massively tragic character. And when you think of like the painting of her in the wall, like she's just this tragic heroine character. And I really like the idea that these tragic characters, she didn't know she was a tragic character. Like, she didn't know she was going to end up dying that way. And I kind of, I wanted to play with that, because she's more important to the story of Hamlet dead than she is alive. When she's alive, she's just a girl who's in love with Hamlet. When she's dead, she becomes motivation for her brother, for Hamlet, for, you know, she's this symbol of innocence lost. And so for me, for obvious reasons, that resonated with Rachel in the first game, in that Rachel alive didn't do anything for the first game. Rachel dead was the whole reason the first game happened. So I wanted to play with that. So it was always going to be Hamlet because of Ophelia. And then everything else just sort of worked really nicely from that. The fact that Zach being Hamlet and Lawrence being Laertes, like their characters were like suited their mini characters I was coming up with. So that's because of Ophelia basically, and then being able to use that Rosemary for Remembrance motif was nice.
Yeah, and obviously I love the fact that you can basically have like, you have Rachel there, you have Victoria there, you have Steph there, which is kind of like all nice to kind of like put into full circle with that. So, okay, Emma, so obviously we spoke about Claudia Leonardi. We love Claudia. She's done incredible work on here, but in this as well, Emma has also shown her talent as a comic book artist as well. So I'm going to show you on here as well, for people on the screen as well. We're going to show you some Emma Vieceli comic works as well that she's done. So Emma, what are the first feelings that come to mind when I show you this cover?
Oh, just satisfaction. That was like, it was emotional drawing that one, because that was the last thing I drew, because I drew the first cover for the very first comic. And so I wanted to draw the cover for the last comic as well. So the idea they were 4 years apart, and I wanted to sort of, just a nice closure for everyone. So getting to use all the Transect kind of portals and, it's emotional. And it very much for me summed up, that's Max and Chloe on their journey now.
I love that one out of all the ones I've seen, but this is also a very, very nice one that I've seen as well.
Yeah.
So what's the first things that come to mind when you see this one?
I still love that cover. I think it's one of my favorite images I've ever drawn, actually, because I love that it looks like just a picture of a camera. But then when you get closer and you see the three girls in the viewfinder and having the pride strap on it and the little butterfly sticker, like I made a little animation of that. I don't know if I've still got it, that just had like the the steam spiraling and stuff, and the lens turning. it was one image that summed up a lot of things. And I like, as you could probably tell, I like things with layers. So it was like having the coffee for the pocket time in the front and the viewfinder. Yeah, it was, I like things that say a lot in one image, and that did for me.
For sure. I think this is yours. Please help God.
No, that's not mine. That's Claudia.
Oh,
yeah.
that's Claudia.
It's a fun
Okay,
game.
so I'm not completely distinct on the Vieceli / Claudia art yet, so I need to go back.
It's especially hard because Andrea coloured both of us. Well, not the first one you showed I coloured, but the camera Andrea coloured. So you've got like one person's colouring as well.
So we're going to move that one out there. I'm pretty sure this is an Emma Vieceli one.
Those definitely are. And actually, I only found out recently because it popped up on my Google searches. The French editions have just finished because they did do the first 3 books. They hadn't printed the last 3 books. They now have, and they've used those as the covers of them, which is pretty cool.
Yep. So we have 4 of these as well for reference, guys. We have Tristan, Tristan, Max, Rachel, and Chloe, which are all quite nice here. And also as well, is this yours?
Yeah. That was where it all began.
See, I thought that was Claudia at first. I got really misled.
No, that was me. Yeah,
so,
well, that was getting to kick it off was nice.
Yeah, it's quite cool that you had the chance to like input with the comic book art in here as well, and it's quite nice to, I think, wrap up there as well on the comics because we've talked for quite a while, and as I said, we could probably talk for a long time. However, we also need to talk about this, which is Breaks.
Ooh, yeah.
This is the Emma Vieceli story. So I picked up my 2 copies when I was with Emma at Traveling Man. When we spoke, this wasn't even out. This wasn't even a physical release. This wasn't, I think this was Kickstarted when we were talking. And this is a long history as well that you have with this, because this is, I think, is it 10 to 12 years that you've been working on like the story ideas? And
yeah, we were making it. So even we started writing it. I'm saying we because I co-wrote the story with Malin Ryden, and we'd been concepting the story, and then even at the point we started on the comic itself, which that was then obviously I did the comic duties on it, and we were doing it a page a week on first Mac G's and then Tapas, and so we released it 1 page every week for 11 years. It was a long talk about commitment to a story. It's crazy. So it was a very slow process making it, just not for any, purely because we wanted it to be in a place where it was accessible, especially to the target. I mean, the audience is actually a lot bigger than it's lovely because it actually appeals to a wider variety of people than we maybe originally thought. But actually our kind of initial target audience, we wanted to make sure that anyone could access it, and so we thought doing it for free online was a good way of doing it, like the generous fools that we are, and not realizing that would mean we would have to do it slowly because we had to do it around other work. And so it took 11 years 11 years of my life. And then Orbit Books, so we did have some publications we did Kickstarter special editions, and Soaring Penguin Press printed books 1 and 2 as we were going. And it was all done on quite a sort of small personal scale. And then it was only when I was about a month off the end of finishing the comic online, the Orbit Books, who print those editions, swept in. And Orbit are like, they're big. They're part of Hachette. They publish things like the Expanse. They're a big publisher. And so that was really lovely. So we had to then sort of make decisions about what we did with it, whether we went with them or not, and we ultimately decided to, on the basis that they printed all 3 books in 1 year, because I was like, I can't wait any longer. I need book 3 out. So that's book 2, and then book 3 is out in December.
Yep, so I'm not going to try and spoil anyone for it because I'm currently on this book now. So I've read the first volume. I'm on book 2, and I'm going to make sure that people go and check this out because if you do love Life is Strange, you do love Emma's work, you'll find very much what you're looking for in terms of this content. Yay. And on as well, obviously, volume 3 is coming out later this year, this will wrap up the Break story. I kind of wanted to know what it's like because obviously the 2 of you are writing this. I don't know how that collaboration goes, the 2 of you writing like a comic book, essentially, but what's it like to kind of basically fulfill what is now like a decade plus long project, and then for it to culminate in December with the final volume coming out as well?
I mean, everything I said about finishing Life is Strange, that was 4 years. So times that by 3 and you get Breaks. And again, it's weird with Breaks, especially because I finished making it a long time ago now. So we're probably already coming up 2 years since I finished drawing it. But exactly like I said with Life is Strange, I had parts where I was writing the last page that Amala was going to be in, or drawing like the last line that Irina would say. And that was a really crazy feeling because with Life is Strange, although I feel a massive ownership over a lot of those characters, they became my babies. And certain ones of them, like obviously Tristan, the High Seas, they are my babies.
Mhm.
But there were others in there. Max and Chloe were never my babies originally. I just got to sort of borrow them for a while. Whereas with Breaks, they're all entirely 100% our babies. So we went on quite a journey with them. So yeah, getting to the end of it online was really emotional. And again, weirdly, much like the end of Life is Strange, I was slightly disappointed because we had this, it was a nice storm in this case, but the fact that Orbit approached us when they did, and part of their stipulation to us was you can't print the third book because we want to be the first to print the full series, which makes a lot of sense for them. But it meant we couldn't do the Kickstarter. So I'd been gearing up, after 11 years of publishing this comic, I really wanted to do a bit of an excitement online and having a Kickstarter and having a party and, oh my God, we finished the series. And instead it was just sort of like, well, there's the last webcomic episode. And now I'm going to wait 2 years for the books to come out. So it was, not quite the ending I would have wanted online, but ultimately it gives us these lovely editions of the books. So it's worth it. It's going to be, December. I think the plan is to have a little party at Gosh Comics in London. And it's going to be amazing because it really is going to be the end of an era for me. By the time that comes around, it will have been sort of 12, 13 years of my life on that comic. So, yeah, it's a big deal.
For sure. And as Emma said as well, the third volume comes out later. Yeah, I've been very vague with my questions because I want you to go and check it out because it's not something we should spoil here. So Emma produced that as well. So do go and check that out as well. Malin's worked on that as well. So do go and support independent comic book work there. Emma, 2 final questions before we wrap up because people will be like, how have you brought Emma on here and not talked about double exposure? Because that is a big reveal. Kind of Tel's come back, Max has come back. You kind of carried Max's story on for 4 years after a period where Max's story wasn't told. I kind of wanted to know what your initial reaction was just seeing it because I was watching it on the Xbox showcase on my chair and I fell out of my chair when I heard Hannah Tell's voice because I didn't believe it for a minute. And there she was. I'm kind of curious, what was it like seeing it, if anything?
I'm really excited, first of all, to see Max sort of back where she belongs. I knew it was coming, so I think if I hadn't if I hadn't known, I think I would have also fallen off of my chair. Absolutely. I didn't know much of the detail of it. I just knew that there was something in the works because it was very hard to be in the position I was back then and not have any kind of hint. And I was grateful I'd had that hint because, as I say, I would have been pretty shocked if I had seen it and didn't know. Primarily I'm just excited that there's going to be another game. I obviously have a lot of thoughts, some of which I probably can't talk about as easily as I'd like to. I'm really excited to see how the game plays out. There's the fact that there are segues to ideas that were put in the comics is mostly really exciting to me. So again, I'm kind of the same as everyone else in that I'm just sitting and waiting to see how it's all used, really. I'm not going to fool myself, but I would be made one of the happiest people in the world if a little Tristan or a Pixie appeared at some point, or even if they put a song on and a High C song comes on, that'd be awesome. But I mean, it's a big universe, so.
Well, Emma, that was actually my final question because I was going to ask you if you had the chance to put 3 characters, 3 of your babies that you created from your comic series in the game. We're not obviously any knowledge of it, but I've reduced you down. I was 1 at first when I thought the question, but you could pick 3 of them to kind of pluck into that universe, even if it's for a cameo, Brody-esque walk past Max with a coffee or something and see them. Which 3 characters would you pick?
Can I count the High Seas as 1 character? They come as a unit.
I'm not Claudia. I love when you did that, Claudia. Here's a bar with 15 characters. And it's she's and I've got all this work to do, and you just put 15 characters in the scene. Unfortunately, the High Seas 1 person counts as 1 person. Unfortunately, so you have to pick one out
obviously, especially given I've seen the same trailers everyone else has. Tristan, to me, would make a lot of sense. Probably Tristan, Pixie, and Dex.
I like them. Good picks.
Yeah, it's hard though.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I have to choose 1 High Seas mate, because Pixie would make. I don't know. That's really 3 of them is harsh. You can't break up the High Seas. That's tough.
Well, mine was a cheating answer, which is going to be I was going to pick Gladys, and the high seas come out of the van, which is
Very
like,
clever. Yeah, very good. The beauty with the high seas, you could have like, they go past a record shop that has an LP cover. That's got that would be enough for me. But yeah, I don't know. I know nothing on that side of things. So at the moment, I am as a Life is Strange player, I'm really excited. I feel sort of chuffed, if I'm allowed to, that we started that comic at a time when, for all that Life is Strange as a series was carrying on, the Max and Chloe story was done. And who knows, it might have been that they always were going to do another game, but I like to feel that the comic sort of kept that fire alive a bit, and kept those characters in the consciousness and maybe made it easier for another game to appear. So yeah, I'm excited, and it's going to be really hard not to watch it and be like, my baby, but she's so grown up now. I hope she's the Max who learned a lot of stuff over the course of the comics. We'll find out.
Sure, I hope so as well. I hope Gladys is in there. I'm a big fan of Gladys.
That would be amazing.
It'd be nice.
I would freaking love, take all the cosplay in the world. If someone ever made a Gladys and went on a road trip. I mean, hell, use the road trip. I researched meticulously that road trip that the girls and the Hamlet cast went on. It is a genuine road trip you can take in America. The comic pretty much gives you all the timings of how long it takes to get between them as well. Make a Gladys go on that road trip. I'd do it. It looks amazing.
My favorite thing that could possibly happen in this game is if we're there's a bar sequence they've shown us so far in Double Exposure, and if we went over to it, it's a high C song, and if we clicked on it, but it's a cover of Emma Vieceli with her banjo, that'd be like, that'd be like it'd be the most complete thing I've ever imagined. I don't,
a long time.
That's what I'd hope for the high C's reference. It'd be like, there we go, perfectly fit in there.
Well, I'm under NDA. I can't possibly comment on my ukulele appearance.
Emma, thank you so much. Obviously, we could have spoke for about 4 or 5 hours because there's so much in here as well. But it was great to catch up with you. It was great to chat with the comics and for you to end your arc there as well. And obviously, you've got a lot of things to look forward to as well going forward, and especially with breaks as well, Volume 3. So people do check that out. We'll wrap it up here. So, guys, if you did enjoy this interview, as always, one more time as well, please do consider dropping subscribe on the channel, turn notifications, like the video, and share with your friends. Helps support the channel, helps keep up to date with all the Life is Strange content and everything else we do on this channel. And as well, you can follow Emma on social media. She's on everything as well. Blue Sky, X, or Twitter, you want to call it, Instagram. She's on everything, so do check her out on there as well. So, Emma, thank you so much again. Hopefully, we cross paths in the future. Obviously, I want my breaks, Volume 3. Signed at some point, among many other things. So we will definitely hopefully cross paths in the future at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys, stay tuned. We'll see you in the next interview. I don't know what that is, but there'll be something definitely coming to the channel. But yeah, thank you again, Emma, for your time.
Thank you.